Mattarot is a queer men's life coach who specializes in providing holistic wellness, spirituality, and sexual coaching to gay, bi, pansexual, transmasculine, and questioning men. Matt's mission is to empower queer men to live their best lives by offering high impact, personalized coaching and ongoing support. His work is centered around four pillars: spiritual holistic wellness, sexual well being, building better connections, and embodying our life's purpose. You can learn more about Matt Tarot's work on Instagram and TikTok at Matt Tarot, or checking out his website, www.matttarot.com. And we're speaking with him today on Third Eyesight. My name is Juan Francisco, and I'm a psychic medium and tarot card reader. I've always been curious about the supernatural, the paranormal, and psychic abilities, and I'm here to share my stories and interview folks who want to share their own stories with us. Let's get to it. Matt, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Juan. This is awesome.
I'm so excited to talk to you. I forgot when we connected on Instagram, but I feel like we've been following each other for a while. And I love your content. I told you this offline, but I'm saying it on the record on the podcast. Matt's content is so great. So great.
Oh, thank you. I mean, when you live on the internet like me, it just becomes second nature, I guess, but it's not exactly a transferable skill to like make quick, snappy videos of me lip syncing things.
Listen, I've tried my hand at lip syncing things. It's not easy. It's not easy, but I feel like you're just so good at taking your insights that you have to share with people and like put them into these nuggets of Instagram reels and TikTok videos. It's really well done. It's really well done. Um, well, tell us, where are you based and a little bit about what you do for work.
Yeah. So I am located outside of Toronto in Canada, and I am a queer men's life coach with a predominant focus on spirituality and sexuality.
Great. And you may get this question a lot, but what is the difference between going to a life coach versus going to a counselor or a therapist?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question, especially because I actually am a trained therapist. I have a master's degree in creative arts therapy, and I went to university at Montreal, at Concordia University. And so the biggest difference that I found is that there's a lot of bureaucratic red tape with what therapists can and cannot do, which makes sense considering they are a regulated profession and they are doing, really, really important work, and it's necessary for them to have those boundaries. But with life coaching, effectively anyone can call themselves a life coach, which makes it, problematic or difficult to like stand out from the rest. And the reason why I believe I do is because of my background in my education. Um, and the difference really in the actual sessions is I find that I'm able to do so much more as a life coach than I was doing as a therapist. I can bring the woo woo in. I can, talk about, some really tricky sexual stuff that many therapists can't do unless they have specific accreditations. And a lot of my training and background and study is in esoteric work, which I know that this podcast is quite aligned with.
Yeah, definitely. And actually jumping off of that and going into my next question, it sounds to me, and well, watching you on Instagram, and I know that you've recently um, kind of reformatted how you present yourself on Instagram, the content you cover. And I think when I first started following you, well, I mean, your name is Matt Tarot, right? So, what sparked your interest in the esoteric, in spirituality, or the spiritual human being? What sparked your interest in all of that?
For sure. So it really started when I was like a little kid, and I was playing all kinds of like fantasy video games where it was like these epic heroes on quests using crystals with magical power. And I wanted to believe that all of that was real. And I really wanted to like see that in my real world. So then I guess I manifested it because when I turned like, 13, 14 in high school, My third eye chakra really blasted open, and I started to see spirits. I started to encounter some pretty spooky things. And, I know that in the psychic medium world, there's so many different perspectives on if like spirits can have like malevolent, inclinations or whatever. But like I came across some pretty spooky stuff personally, and I wasn't even trying to. So, that kind of shook me awake of like, whoa, there's more stuff to this world than, meets the eye. And then also my girlfriend in high school, at lunch hour one day, brought her tarot cards. And I was like, what are you talking about? This is real? People actually do this in the real world? I basically just asked her to tutor me, and she helped me here and there. And I got my first official deck when I was in my early 20s. So it was kind of like a long, drawn out process of seeing ghosts, feeling energy, and understanding that esoteric practices exist in our everyday lives, even though it's not talked about.
Yeah, that there's more than just this physical stuff that we're seeing everywhere, for sure.
Correct.
Now, I'm just curious if you could indulge me for just a little bit. What is one, if you could share with us a spooky experience you had, if you feel comfortable, but also if there was a lovely paranormal experience you had that comforted you, whether that be like an entity that once lived or something of the divine. Would love to hear one of each kind of experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my favorite spooky story is I grew up in a very natural neighborhood. There was like a lot of trees. It was like very beautiful, a lot of greenery. And I was walking with my girlfriend very late at night, and she's hypersensitive. She literally just pulls things to her. So anytime we would hang out, something weird would always happen, and we didn't really mean for it to. And she just suddenly dashes off into this field. And I'm like, where are you going? And then she's running, and I'm chasing after her. And it's like probably 11 p.m. It's very dark. And she just stops. And I'm like, what's going on? And she said, don't move. And the kind of psychic I am is clairsentient, primarily. I'm also a little claircognizant. I'm pretty sure I'm saying that wrong, and a little clairaudient. But most of my psychic information comes from basically feeling things. When I tell you that I very clearly saw with my eyes, and we were completely sober, shambling bodies of warriors holding weapons slowly coming towards us. It was a surreal. And the we didn't know what to do. We panicked, and we were kind of just standing there. And then as time went on, we realized, okay, first of all, these are spirits, like we're not hallucinating or whatever. And second, they were indigenous. And
Mhm.
so they were basically just trying to protect their land and like bound to that space. And we don't know the history of the area, we don't know anything. But basically, they saw us and were like, we have to chase after you. And it was like how it looked was amazing. They were like misty, slow motion moving. And like, it was like they were moving underwater, but you could very clearly see their body. And like, some of them were holding spears. It was crazy. And I've never experienced anything like that before. So we basically very quickly made our way out of that field, and we got back to her place, and we were talking with her aunt around the table. She was just making tea. I was like, do you want some? And we were like, yes. And then out of nowhere, we started to hear war drums. And we look at each other, and I was like, do you hear that? And she's like, yeah. And the aunt was like, hear what? I don't hear anything.
I'm getting goosebumps right now.
Like,
That's
wild,
insane.
right?
That's
Wild,
insane.
wild. Even more wild was the cojones I had to decide to go home and walk home after that and get back to my place, which is like a 10-minute walk. I was fine. I didn't sleep that night. And actually, ironically, you wanted a positive story. So this is how it kind of ties up with a bow. My friend, another day, just texts me and she's like, Matt, you have to go back to that field. And I was like, why? Like, that was such a scary experience. And she's like, go back to that field and just touch the ground. And I was like, okay. Remember, I'm the psychic here, and she's telling me this stuff. Like, she's so tuned in without even trying. It's wild. So I follow her advice and I go. And I just get this very, I didn't know what to expect, but I get this very clear image in my mind's eye of like just like beautiful rolling fields and like a beautiful, thriving, quiet community and like families of indigenous people. So like that was their home. And like this was before I had really begun to do any of the decolonizing of my spiritual work. So I then didn't really appreciate how spirit at night was trying to be aggressive, and then spirit during the day was trying to be like, this is why. But having that experience of the day and the night and seeing that whole thing play out, it just was like so like, oh my God. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's an incredible story. And it's interesting because I don't know if you're familiar with Gettysburg here in the United States in Pennsylvania. It's where they say the bloodiest battles of the American Civil War occurred. And I've been there, and it's a really small town, and the battlefield is a national park here. And so there have been a lot of reports of people seeing soldiers from either side of the war marching, and some people think it's residual energy. It's the energy that we've left here, that they left here, that we're seeing on a loop, right? And I wonder if that's what you saw. It doesn't really matter. I was just wondering out loud, but regardless of whether it's residual or something else, it's such a powerful energy. I mean, war has a lot of energy to it, and wanting to protect your community, that I mean, the intention behind that. So that's beautiful. That's a beautiful story.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, I just want to quickly add as like an avid video game nerd, if you ever want the most accurate depiction of what a spirit looks like when it's trying to manifest in 3D, look up the game franchise Fatal Frame. This is so specific and niche, I'm sorry, but literally what I saw that night of how they were like misty and like underwater, but you could see a corporeal form, that game franchise, it's a Japanese game, nailed it. So like they must have had like a paranormal consultant on the team because it was like to a T exactly my experience. It was wild. So anyway,
Well, I play some video games, so I'll make note of that for sure.
you would love it. You
I'm
would love it.
curious.
Yeah.
I'm curious. Well, so switching over to life coaching, how did you make the pivot? 'Cause you said you studied creative arts therapy in your studies, in your graduate studies. Um, what was the pivot to life coaching as opposed to becoming a therapist or becoming a counselor?
Honestly, it's not as exciting as you probably thought. It was
That's
because
okay.
it was purely practical. Because in Canada, specifically Ontario, where I am right now, after going to school, university for 7 years, I was not really able to make a livable wage because alternative mental health care is not covered on Ontario healthcare at all. In order for my schooling to have been covered by Ontario Healthcare, I would have had to become a psychotherapist. But nobody tells you that after you go to university for 7 years and spend all that money and that time and that energy.
Hmm.
And so I was like, I don't know what to do. I was working on a sliding scale and I slid so low that like I was losing money, but I was, I was working with kids with disabilities. I had like a private practice for a minute, but it just wasn't conducive to doing it long term. So I slowly pivoted into doing actually the work that you do, more so being in an esoteric space. I'm so sorry. You'll have to forgive me. That is my cat.
Oh,
So
pets are welcomed. All good.
if you hear meowing, that's probably what it is. I just let
Cats
him
are
out of
allowed
his
on this
cage.
podcast. No worries at all.
Perfect. So I was doing the tarot readings for a while, as well as crystal energy healing, but something was missing because I had that piece of holding space for other people and being a container for people and like an actual practical education in it in comparison to the people who say that they're a life coach and they don't know what they're doing. And so I got a business coach and I was like, teach me how to like make a business with all of the skill sets that I have. And I worked with him for like 6 months and it completely changed the game for me. And now basically I'm doing everything that I had been trained to do and had been studying in my esoteric work, etc., all at once instead of me trying to like segregate everything.
Yeah, and you have a focus on catering to the queer male community. Why the queer male community? Why cater to that community? Why is that important to you personally? Um, and why should people be aware of the experiences of that community as related to your work?
Absolutely. Yeah. Really, it was just because I grew up not having any support. And, I grew up in a homophobic family. I had friends that accepted me, but it wasn't enough because I felt like I was constantly going home to a place that rejected me. And then when I went away to university and was like living on my own as a young adult for the first time, I still didn't have that support. And like, stumbling through your first times of everything, your first date, your first encounters, your first partner, all of that was a mess. And it really just motivated me to want to give back to the community. And not to mention, there's a lot of queer male helpers out there right now that have the best of intentions, but are truly, I believe, using platforms to uplift themselves in vanity alone because they might look a certain way or have a certain level of status. And I have a podcast and have conversations about that kind of stuff all the time, so I'm not going to bring that here. But I just felt motivated personally to help the community that I'm a part of because I didn't really get the help that I really, really needed.
Thanks for sharing that, being very open about that. And I'm wondering, because I think we're in the same age bracket. So I feel like I'm looking at queer men who are 10 years younger than we are. And for me, I mean, I had my first everything in my 20s. Now, other people in our age brackets, maybe they had them at younger ages, but I just keep hearing this pattern that folks who were born before a certain year, um, we tended to be late bloomers, some of us, and that those who are way younger than we are today are having earlier experiences because there's a little bit more acceptance, way more work to do, but a little more acceptance. So I'm curious to hear from you. What are the age groups that tend to feel gravitated towards working with you, and do you notice a difference between different ages of the people you work with?
The men that I work with right now are predominantly like 35 plus. I have had a couple of younger folks reach out to me, but I just didn't think it was a good match because they really need like a therapist. It's not like they a lot. And also, I should mention, sorry, the difference between life coaching and therapy is the fact that like I'm here to help them achieve their goals. So it is a little therapeutic in the sense that we're unpacking your crap, but like if you don't have the emotional piece down of what you need to work through and you're coming to somebody and you're like fix me, fix me, fix me, it's like I can definitely help you with that, but I'm here to help you transform. I'm here to help you change. And that requires a certain level of emotional intelligence and emotional maturity. And I find that folks that are younger usually need to have more life experiences before they're even ready to be coached by somebody, whereas a therapist like a youth counselor or a therapist that specializes in queer folks in their 20s, like that's going to be a very specific dialogue and vernacular and specialty. And you know, I've even had men in their like 50s reach out to me and they're like, "You're younger than me, but I need your help." So it's interesting. I do know what you're talking about though, and I have seen it, and I have had to process my own feelings about it because a part of me would have loved to have a boyfriend at 17 instead of like going on the internet to find some random stranger because I had to do that.
Yeah,
And so
not
just
judging you. Same. I've been there. Yes.
yeah, well, a lot of queer men have, right?
Hmm.
Because what other option did we have? But you are presenting a very interesting point that, younger generations not need to worry about that so much because at school, it's okay, they're gay. Oh, cool, I'm gay too. You want to go eat lunch together under that tree over there? And like that's the conversations that are probably happening now.
Yeah. And what is thus far for you the most rewarding thing about your work with queer men?
I love seeing them do the work themselves and really commit to it. And I know that sounds silly, but like I have a client I'm working with right now, and I care about them so much. And when they first came to the table, they brought everything. They were like, I need to change my life. I need to feel more confident about myself. I want to find a partner. I need to find community. I don't like my job. And I was like, whoa, like this is first of all a gold mine. There's a lot to unpack here. But also too, like let's start building out these goals. Like how are we going to address this? How are we going to get you to where you want to be? And little by little, as the sessions have gone on, they're taking initiative. They're like, "Oh, I went to this queer men's group and I met some cool people and it was awesome." And I'm like, "That's great. That wasn't even on your to-do list for this week and you did it." And so seeing them commit to the work and just do it because they're motivated is what I love seeing the most, because it means that they're invested in their own transformation. I'm not a miracle worker. I'm literally just walking alongside them and helping give them structure to make their life transform. And of course, people might need that, but seeing them do the magic is what is the most rewarding.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I period. That's such a gorgeous way to look at the work you do. That's absolutely beautiful. And I'm gonna pivot with this question. What has been the most challenging thing in this work for
Mm,
you?
yeah. When they are completely disinterested in what I have to offer or say. And I'm not saying that, like, I only like working with clients who like what I have to tell them. It's when clients in general are so stuck in a narrative and they're so like, well, this is what my life looks like and there's nothing anybody can say or do and nothing you suggest will make me change my mind about it. It's like, okay, so here we are in the room together, not sure what you want to happen next. And it's interesting because oftentimes when I've experienced that, they have still done the work, but it's almost like they need to be resistant first. They're like, no, I need to push against you. It's like, okay, fine, push against me. You paid me to help you. So if you don't want to try things I'm suggesting, that's your prerogative. So it's challenging because I want to see them grow and change. And if they're not willing to, then it's like we're just in a tango. So either I misstep or you misstep, or we just keep going in circles until you decide to try something. It's almost like I know that they're capable of the change, but because they don't want to do it, I get like, not frustrated, but like, oh, like, come on, you're so close. Just like consider that I might be wrong. You know what I mean? I'm not all knowing. The only way for us to find out, though, is for you to try it.
Right. Yeah. If I may, I'm not a therapist, but that sounds like with someone who's in that stuck in that rut, that's where therapy can help. I literally that's how I entered. I mean, I see a therapist and when I first saw this therapist, that's the attitude I had. I said, I know I need help, but this is the way it is. So help me.
Right.
And it's been
Yeah.
helping, but that's
Yeah.
therapy. So it's if I
Yeah.
imagine with life coaching as and you just spoke to this, there has to be an openness. There has to be a willingness.
And even if there isn't, it's not a big deal because we find a way to make it work. You know what I mean? We find a way to explore, or, you meet the client where they're at and you're like, okay, cool. Well, how about you consider this instead of what I was suggesting before? And more often than not, they're cool with it. It's really just, I don't, if you're going to pay someone, why do we have to bargain? Like, why do we have to bargain? I have your best interest at heart. That's the most challenging thing for me. Like, do you trust me? Oh my God, like the scene from Aladdin with Aladdin and Jasmine on the carpet, that whole moment. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, no, I mean, literally the other day, or a month ago, I apologized to my therapist about the way I did it. I don't know, with a session, he goes, "Juan, you're paying me. I'm
yeah.
here for you. Like, you tell me what we're gonna talk about. Don't
Yeah.
apologize, but I'm
Yeah.
here for you." But
Yeah.
see, it's like it's sort of like a therapy or a life coach and a client relationship. It is a relationship. There is a working together, and yeah, the way you put it before when I asked you what's rewarding about it, it was just such a, like I said, a gorgeous way of sharing, of expressing that partnership that happens in a client coach relationship. So, and what advice do you have for people who want to be life coaches? Like, I feel like in the since the pandemic, actually, and we talked about this on your live soon to be podcast episode, how 2020 people got, I don't want to say more psychic. They discovered their psychic abilities or got more psychic than they already were. And a lot of people became life coaches in 2021. Like, I've noticed that. So um I'm curious to hear from you. Let's start with that. Why do you think that is? Why is there such an interest these days in life coaching as
I
a path?
think, sorry to interrupt. I think it truly is an interest to save the planet. I think it's an interest to save humanity. And I know that sounds so dramatic. That sounds so video game. That sounds so anime. But like, when you are living in a world that is made to keep you oppressed, keep you depressed, keep you down and unsure of yourself, and you don't know how to help, but you know that you can offer a listening ear or you can offer your own personal expertise, I feel like that's a part of the motivator. Um, is it a good motivator? Absolutely not, because the majority of people out there that are calling themselves life coaches are definitely not qualified, nor should they be doing it. Uh, and I know that sounds so terrible of me to say, considering I'm calling myself a life coach. But the only reason I'm calling myself a life coach is because I have the training and expertise of a therapist, and I also have a bunch of other skills that are so niche that don't fit into therapy. And also, I can't be a therapist and do other things that I've been trained in. That it's like I could just marry them under this very, very specific umbrella. So I just feel like maybe 2020 opened everybody's eyes to see how we could live in a better world. We could transform this world by putting our best foot forward and helping as many people as possible.
Yeah, and I think 2020 made I mean, people got laid off from their jobs or they were in jobs that whole year and they reconsidered, how much time do I spend with the people I love? Do I love my job? Do I love my? I mean, there's always a story about people breaking up because they were stuck at home together. Like, oh shit, I don't think I can live with you. I don't want to live with you anymore.
Yeah.
Or people moved in with each other because they felt forced to because of job loss. And um, yeah, it was fodder for people reconsidering big decisions in their life. And that, yeah, what you said makes total sense. And so what advice do you have for people who have an interest in becoming a life coach?
Love that. I honestly think you need to find your own path to how you would help people. The majority of what you see on social media is all smoke and mirrors. This industry is wrought with charlatans and scam artists because they are leveraging a lot of people's desperation for this picture perfect life. And so when you are investigating and exploring the idea or the concept of becoming a life coach, really identify how it is you're going to help people. How are you going to show up for people? What is your expertise? What makes you stand out in comparison to, you know, Mandy wearing that like silly hat that all the coaches wear, or like Brock who like has like an 8 pack and like will tell you how to biohack your body. They're all the same. They're carbon copies of each other. It's crazy. So like, don't become a Mandy or a Brock. Really be like, what do you have? Because I bring out crystals, sometimes I bring out my cards, sometimes I don't touch the metaphysical stuff at all, and then it's straight up therapy, and I don't plan for it, it just happens that way. Other times I'm telling them, okay, you know what? You have intimacy issues? Let's get you on Grindr and find you a date. Like, it is so specific to me and my experience and where I come from as a person overall, not me wearing a sun hat being like, you can live your best life by manifesting it. Like, I'm that's not my bag, and I don't think everybody needs to be toting the same experience as a life coach. Sorry, I'm getting a little heated, but I
I
think you
love it. Love
think you
it.
get it.
I totally get it. First of all, Mandy with the hat. That is my new nickname for when I see those chicks, those cookie cutter chicks who are like, you can
Yeah.
manifest 222 333. That, and also this This sounds very similar to how I and many other psychics talk about psychic scammers. And either, I mean, I just did an episode on how there are psychics who are truly gifted who are scamming people, and there are people who aren't psychic. People have copied your account,
Oh
they've
my
copied
God.
my account.
Ugh.
I mean, that's a whole different story, but yeah, like, so I'm not very familiar with Tony Robbins. I can't judge him, but that's just that idea of like hyping up like total um I don't know what to call it, but I'm gonna take his name out of it. But like the cult-ish like,
Yeah.
and I've done some of those seminars in the past myself, and they were very interesting. And sometimes you see trickles of that in some life coaches on social media, and it's more about, it's like a cult of personality thing more than it is about, that's what I mean to say. And I don't know Tony Robbins and his work very well, but I think of people who like, it's more of a cult of personality than it is about helping people or transforming people. um yeah, yeah, I feel your annoyance, because there are also a lot of psychics who do very similar things.
I know exactly what you're talking about, and I think it is so wild that in this day and age, there are still people who are trying to like take advantage of others, pretending to be a psychic or like a witch or like, casting a spell or like, I'm gonna, help you manifest, bring back your twin flame, like all of these crazy things. Because, and this is where I'm gonna get just a bit woo, we are so close to an even bigger global spiritual awakening where we thought 2020 is when a lot of people decided to like do this with the third eye and wake up. No, it's going to get even bigger and bigger and bigger that those people are not only going to be exposed, but like they're going to get what's due to them. So I just think it is wild that people still think that they'll be able to get away with this in the next like 10, 15, 20 years because everybody is going to be a little bit intuitive.
That is my goal, is to remind people they're intuitive too. And that's my hope too. Well, I've heard, I'm not an astrologist, but I've heard that the age of Aquarius started in the last few years, and that the age of Aquarius is about awakening to your spiritual intuitive side. And that's what the song was about in the 60s, you know? So that's all I know about the age of Aquarius. But I heard that from somebody recently. That's what it's about. People awakening to that. Um, and what advice do you have for someone in the queer community who is thinking of seeing a life coach? Like, are there reasons they shouldn't? And you kind of delved into this a little bit. Are the reasons they, what are reasons they should see a life coach, or reasons maybe they should go another path?
Sure, yeah. I really think that if you have a desire to make that change and if you have a desire to transform your life and you're ready to do that work, you should definitely see a coach. If you feel like you are stuck, but you don't want to do anything different and you're feeling hopeless or even helpless, that's when like therapy would make more sense because you want to have a certain you want to have a certain level of confidence and self-belief that you are ready to show up and do the work. Does that mean I would turn somebody away? I don't think so. The only time that I think I would really turn someone away is if they decide to be like very combative with everything that I was suggesting, because it means that they really are looking to work out their emotions and not actually take action for the transformation. So if you're a queer person or a queer man and you are looking for life coaching and you are ready to make that change and ready to put in that work, that is an excellent time to start doing a little bit of homework and research and look around on the internet or see if there's someone local or, whatever works best for you. If you truly feel stuck, but you're also like in a slump, then like, call a crisis hotline, maybe see if you can get set up with a therapist, or really just get yourself in a place where you are safe. Because then that way, if a coach comes down on you and is like, I'm not your friend, I'm your coach, you hired me to help you, like, and I'm not saying that I do that all the time, but sometimes I need to. You won't be destabilized or, oh my God, like there's a certain level of readiness that is required for coaching, I believe.
Yeah, that feels, I mean, I'm not an expert in this stuff, but that feels like very spot on, clear advice. That sounds really helpful. And My last question I want to ask you before we wrap up, and I love this question. What advice would your current self give to your younger self?
Oh, oh my God. If they don't accept you, it's okay, and you can walk away from them. You will find people that love you. People already do love you. And even if they don't accept you, they love you. But if they hurt you because they don't understand you, you can walk away.
Hmm. Yeah, that is something that so many of us could we're still reminding ourselves of that all the time. And if I may add a little bit more to it, from in my experience, I think I'm learning that even if in the present I'm not I'm struggling with people accepting me, there are people out there. Yeah, your cat totally agrees. I love the cat. Your cat's like, "Yes, bitch." So, even if in the present there are there are people who aren't accepting me, there are people out there that would. It's about finding our tribe and finding our people. And that's something, I mean, again, I mentioned this on your live, but I've been involved in some programs that you've facilitated, and that directly catered to that, finding our people. And it's so important to find the ways to do that. Um, so how can people find out more about you and what you do?
Absolutely. So I am on Instagram primarily at Matt Tarot, but you can also find me on TikTok at Matt Tarot. And I also have a website, www.mattarot.com. So that's MATTAROT.com. I've got a newsletter. I'm going to get better about sending it out regularly. And yeah, that is the easiest way to find out what I'm up to.
And talk about the Bear Project. We'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Oh my God, yeah. So I am a part of this really cool collaboration with several other coaches. Sid is very excited about it. And it's basically giving queer men an opportunity to explore their sacred sexuality in workshops that happen over Zoom every new moon and full moon. The time that we're recording this workshop, it has already begun, and the coming Sunday, I'll be facilitating the first workshop called The Erotic Mind, Body, and Spirit. So there is lots to explore there. We already have programming slated until July. So there's lots of opportunity there if you're curious to find some alternative healing regarding your sexuality.
I want to ask a mini question here because I think queer male sexuality, it's such an important focus area. So what are you finding to be a um I don't want to call it an issue, but what is something that you are discovering in clients you work with in regards to their queer male sexuality that they come to you, you're noticing as a pattern that they're coming to you often about? And you can share as much as you want. I want to respect, the confidentiality of your clients, but we'd love to hear a bit of what are you finding to be, I'm going to call it a pain point for lack of a better phrase.
Some really big pain points of working. hmm, I'd say some of the major things that come up when working with queer men exploring their sexuality and sacred sexuality is there's like some performance anxiety stuff, as well as feeling like what they are, the sex that they're getting is not satisfying, and they're very lonely and disconnected. And I think it's a product of us living in a world where we believe we have to like look a certain way and act a certain way and be a certain way, and it's all about status and how you come across and all this performative stuff that we've actually forgotten how to be authentic. We've forgotten how to nurture real true connections, And we've forgotten what all of that even looks like. So when somebody comes to work with me, it's all about really helping them get back into their body, getting them out of their head, and also teaching them how the spirit is involved in sex, how sexual energy is spiritual energy, how sexual energy is spiritual energy. And that, the more in tune you become with yourself and your desires and your hopes and dreams and your future vision of your highest self, the more intimate you'll be able to be with the men that you want to be with, or the more vulnerable you'll be able to be, which allows for healthy relationships. So it's kind of a mixed bag, but at the same time, it's really just about people forgetting how to be authentic.
I love the sound of how you address those points, and I feel like my own personal experience, and I've heard other queer men in my social circles talk about this, because some of us who are of a certain age and above, we grew up um sort of late bloomers. We didn't have the same, like, we didn't have first dates like our peers did in school. We didn't have our first time having sex like our peers did in school. A lot of us, most teenagers, I think, and most kids look at pornography, they discover sex that way. But for some of us, not all of us, but for some of us, we clung on to pornography as the only way to engage with sex. And it was way more visual and in a way visceral, but I mean, pornography can be fun to look at. We're only human, right? But it does set an expectation for some of us. Again, not speaking for everybody, but so the performance anxiety, I can personally, without getting into details about my sex life, that's not what this podcast is about, but I can resonate with that. And body
Yeah.
image issues, we've talked about that. Yeah. So, yeah, thanks for sharing that. And thank you for joining us on the podcast. I'm so happy I got the opportunity to interview you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun, and it's also really cool to create a space where I can talk about the more woo stuff, because everything I talk about now is about the queer male experience, and a lot of them are like, you can see ghosts, and I'm like, sometimes. Anyway, what are we talking about this session?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure your clients will learn even more about you listening to this podcast.
It's true, absolutely. Thank you so much, Juan.
Thanks, Matt. If you have a question or topic you want me to cover on Third Eyesight, head to my website, juanfranciscospirit.com/contact, and send a message my way. If you really enjoyed this episode, leave a review wherever you listen. I'd really appreciate it.